What's the next for you?
Oh, what's next for me? Well,
I mean,
this is a big
at some point you could actually retire and live on a beach somewhere and just kick up your feet.
No, I'm rewired, not retired.
We're coming to you on this episode from the Delmar Divine. It is a place that is changing the community here on this side of town. It's also run by a woman who is small in stature, but big in presence. You're gonna learn something new about Maxine Clark, the fact that she knows ball. Well, welcome to the latest episode of The Rundown with Rene Knott. Something very special for this episode. A woman that really needs no introduction because just about everybody in St. Louis either knows her or knows why she is so famous. Build-A-Bear? Ever heard of that? Well, guess what? The founder is here with us for this episode. Ladies and gentlemen, say hello to Maxine Clark.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for asking.
Glad to hear that. I want to teach people right now something they may not know about you. You're into basketball.
I am into basketball.
How did I get started?
My next door neighbor was the basketball coach. I grew up in Miami, Florida, at the University of Miami. And so they out on the driveway in Miami, you could do it all year long. We used to play basketball. And there was nobody too short or too tall to play basketball, or too young or too old, or girl or boy, didn't matter. We all had to learn how to play basketball. And the way he taught us was really interesting. I didn't know this at the time until one morning I heard somebody outside, but he would get us to be able to make the baskets at a certain height, and then behind our backs he would raise it a couple inches. And then we would keep saying, "Why aren't we getting this?" And then we'd get it, and then he'd raise it again. But one morning I woke up early, and because I heard somebody outside, because the basketball net was not far from my bedroom door, and I looked outside, and he saw me looking outside, and he goes, "Shh." But I thought that was really a good challenge.
Yeah.
He was setting us up to be good, to get to be better, and then new goals all the time. Mm-hmm. So it made a lot of sense to me, and I never did tell anybody until a few years ago when somebody asked me what was the way I learned how to make baskets. And I told him how I learned it. And he said, "That's really interesting technique." But he was a real coach, the way coaches were in those days. He really cared about the young people's education, as well as their basketball skills. And I think it's because the NBA wasn't really that big of a deal, although Rick Barry played at the University of Miami and went to play in the NBA. But anyway, I love it. I love basketball, and I get to go to the SLU games here and WashU basketball games here, and they're both really good basketball, different leagues, but really good.
So when you played point guard.
I played point guard.
I mean, it's kind of a given that you're probably going to be the point guard. But what did being the point guard teach you about life in general?
Well, I think it did really teach me curiosity, because you really have to look all over the court. You have to really be able to see behind your back and in front of you, and really where the players are going. And you have to kind of direct them with signals without you saying anything, really, And so that's really how it works with people that you manage and lead. You hope they're going to get the signals, and that they know you well enough, that you're working as a team together well enough that you can know what to expect. They can read between the lines. They don't have to always be told everything to do. It doesn't always work that way, but that's what the ideal team does do. And I think the more you engage your employees and even the people that may be above you in a particular job, in what you're doing and why you're doing it, they're going to get it, and they're going to play along. And it also giving them a chance to really take the lead and see how they're doing, and then give the feedback. And that's what a point guard does too. And you see, I don't like coaches that yell at the players. I think that's really distracting. I don't even know how they hear it, because they're concentrating on the game. Yeah. But this coach at SLU is much quieter than the past coaches, and I think he's getting a lot more out of the players.
Yeah. Do you think he does that in practice too, though?
No, I don't think he does it in practice. And I think when they're at the bench, he's talking to them, but he's sitting right there in front of them. He's not yelling at them, and it's a whole different demeanor even on his face. You can see it. And I think it's why he's been a successful coach, because he's not tall, he's not thin, he's not big at all. And his son plays like third string, but he comes out every once in a while and usually gets a basket.
A little court time.
Yeah, and he's a good kid. And I think like that I also like, that he's not afraid to put his son out on the court. Now there's some other players that I think that could get a basket or two, but I really like his style, and it reminds me of Coach Hale, who was my coach, my first coach.
Are you a big St. Louis sports fan?
I am. I'm on the sports
we know
commission.
you love basketball, but what is your sport?
Well, what I like about St. Louis is that we bring all these sports here. So I'm on the St. Louis Sports Commission, and I love that we can bring all this entertainment. which I call sports to me is entertainment. Like we just brought the ice skating championships here. We have the NCAA coming here. We have wrestling. I'm not a person that's necessarily going to go to the wrestling matches. I never could quite understand that. But I like that we're doing it, that we're bringing people here, and they can enjoy St. Louis, and we can enjoy them in person, which going to see ice skating in person is like nothing I've ever experienced
incredible.
in my life.
Yeah.
It was so wonderful. And so I've always enjoyed seeing basketball in person, because when we had big tournaments here, I used to try to get tickets to go to them. But I do think sports is and I'm so glad that girls can now play in sports. Yeah. And I saw this new women's flag football team that's going to be in the next Olympics in Los Angeles. And I thought, well, that's really, we've come a long way, baby.
You could have played football.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
I mean, now,
maybe
with
now.
the flag football,
maybe.
you'd be in there.
I really want to look it up. I want to know more about it, because I think that in the 3-on-1 basketball that people are playing, and that there's now women's teams, and
Nafisa Collier, one of the best to come out of St. Louis.
Yeah, she's got one. And I was a sponsor of the St. Louis Surge, and I really want Kalia to still have this goal of bringing a WNBA team here. But she's working on the NBA right now in Texas, so let's see how I'm sure she's learning a lot every single day. But I think we have a lot of opportunity here. We have so many children engaged in sports and soccer out in the county, not so much in the city. We have a lot of opportunity. And I do believe that the one thing we're missing is an NBA and a WNBA team. Yeah. That would make us,
I agree.
The quintessential sports city.
You go back in time, the Hawks played here. Yeah. They won the NBA championship here. So we know it's possible. Do you think that in some ways sports can help bring St. Louis back to where it was, bring it that notoriety that it had, have more people coming in and saying, this is a pretty nice place?
I do think it can. I think it's a very important economic driver, and that the St. Louis Sports Commission does an enormous amount of way out ahead of time, working to bring these events to St. Louis for who stay in hotels, and they go to restaurants, and they do all this thing that around the game. But they also get to see St. Louis at its best. When you're and while we don't have maybe the best center for playing basketball or tennis or any of those, the Enterprise Center was gorgeous for the ice skating, absolutely gorgeous. And we even had a Build-A-Bear there. We set up a Build-A-Bear, and the ice skating bears were there, and they were very popular. There's a way we can tie so many things about St. Louis together: food, our businesses, our local businesses, the zoo, the museums. We have so much to offer. And when people know it, then they come there, or they say, I didn't even know that. And so many people don't know that Build-A-Bear's headquarters here. We're working on that, on raising that awareness and opening up a museum maybe this time next year.
How has life been for you post your deep involvement with Build-A-Bear?
Wonderful. Yeah. It's been an amazing experience to be able to use my business skills in sort of the nonprofit sector, because it is business. Mm-hmm. When you're the business of making St. Louis all it can be, the business of electing the right people to office, the business of managing money so that we have the money to do the things we need to do. These are all business tactics and techniques. And unfortunately, a lot of people that do the work don't really have had business experience. They either make a choice to go to politics or to nonprofit work or to business. Right. And actually, for St. Louis to be successful, we have to really think about them all together because it takes money to run a nonprofit. And if you're not thinking of it as a business, one day when we early opened up Delmar Divine, I was in the elevator, and 2 young girls that were working here were in the elevator, and one of them said to the other, she says, I thought I worked for a nonprofit. She says, you do. And she said, well, why do we always talk about money? And I realized that we needed to create a class that these young, newly hired, new to the workforce, young people could come and find out what goes on inside a nonprofit.
I'm finding out myself. Yeah. And I didn't realize how much went into it. But one of the things I do realize about being in it is the fact that St. Louis is a very giving city. Yeah. People are willing to, if they buy into what you're about, they're more than willing to jump in there and give what they can to make it all work. When you look at what you've been able to build here with Delmar Divine, how much of a village was it to put this together?
It was a huge village. It took 9 months from idea to reality for Build-A-Bear, and 9 years from idea to reality for Delmar Divine, really. Because it was obviously a big hospital, very large. It had been abandoned for quite a number of years, so it had been, falling apart in many places. I mean, we were sitting in a place that was all water when I looked at it the first time. And it takes imagination, which I have a lot of, and it takes money, which I didn't have a lot of, but I had enough to seed the project. And it takes relationships, and I did have that. And so I did have, I went to Bob Clark, I went to Zach Boyers at US Bank. I said, teach me, WashU, teach me about this, because I've never done this, but I know it needs to be done. And the reason that I even discovered it is one of the neighbors around the corner from our KIPP school, we have a KIPP school in this neighborhood, and I was the board chair at the time we opened it. And the neighbors were very excited about reopening this school in the neighborhood. And one of them said to me, I see you always go right when you leave. Why don't you go left and see if you see a house that you might want to buy, and Juanita and I will help you remodel it. So I said, I knew I didn't need a house, but when I first moved here, I lived in Lafayette Square. I said, I'm going to do that. And I came around the corner, and they were just nailing in the for sale sign for this building. And it was bigger the house than he wanted to do.
House.
Yeah, and he said that to me. So I think that's a little larger. But I called up Dennis Lauer at Cortex, and I said, Dennis, why don't you buy this? This could be Cortex West, and I will make it all for nonprofits, and I'll help you. He said, oh, Maxine, I'm so busy. Why don't you do it? And I thought to myself, yeah, why not? But I didn't really know what I was getting into, and I'm glad I didn't, because I might not have done it if I'd known how complex it was to put together a project. This is $100 million. To put together the capital stack for a $100 million project of a building that most people thought should be torn down, but other people thought had so many memories and so many positive stories to tell me about. And so it really engaged me. It was right after Michael Brown had been killed. It was just right after. And I thought, well, we have a lot to do in St. Louis, and I want to be a part of bringing the organizations together that now work sort of all separately and independently. We couldn't get them all in here because we have 20-some thousand nonprofits in St. Louis, but we could get a lot of the important ones here, and we could just knock on each other's door and have to get in our car and go to a meeting. And that has been, proximity is really important to collaboration, yeah. And we have that here, and it's really working. But it was a complex project, so it took a lot of people. Bob Clark said yes to me right away. We'll figure it out. We have all the in-house things to do it. WashU said they would help. Dennis Lauer was a great advisor to me. Anytime I needed to ask him about how they were doing over there, he would tell me and help me. I met so many incredible contractors that I didn't know. I didn't need them all at first because we weren't ready to start construction. But when we did, I knew a lot of minority contractors that were excited to work on this project because they'd been born here.
They know the history.
They knew they'd been born here. And this neighborhood, I hired a WashU history student to do a history of the neighborhood for me. And so she really opened up my eyes to a lot of things that I didn't know about because I wasn't from St. Louis. But this was actually at the turn of the 19th to the 20th century, an immigrant neighborhood. St. Louis was built on immigrants, and this was an immigrant neighborhood. Every single religion that you can imagine had a church or synagogue here. And so people would walk by each other on their way to church, just like you would on Seven Holy Corners in the Central West End. And they'd wave at each other. They went to the same ice cream parlors. They went to the same schools. Nobody went to private school then. It was it was not as common as it is today. And they knew each other, and they were describing my bringing up in Miami. I could tell you, if I didn't know that it was St. Louis and I grew up in Miami, I would say you're discussing my growing up. Their dogs ran free. Nobody locked their doors. Mother called you at 5 o'clock to come home for dinner. Everybody felt free, even though they might not have been as welcome in some places as they were in others. They still had a sense of freedom. Flint Fowler grew up here. Ken Kranzberg grew up here. Robin Boyce. So many people that I've met through doing work. That I didn't know where they grew up, quite frankly. Right. I went up to a person that says, where did you go to high school? But
there's one thing that I find interesting is that everyone calls it the Delmar Divide, the street. But you decided to call this Delmar Divine. Is that a play off of the divide in any way?
Well, I don't want it to be the divide. I didn't see it as a divide. I never was afraid to go north or east or west or, to me, it was like St. Louis. I don't even know sometimes when I'm in one neighborhood or another. Who knows? Unless you have that map that shows all the little neighborhoods. But I actually appreciate the neighborhoods. I like the spirit that they have, the history that they have. But on Michael Brown, and it's just sitting right in front of you, believe in divine order. That was the inspiration. That was covering, I believe, a building on South Broadway. And I looked at the word divide, and if I capitalized the I in the N, it would be about investment, innovation, inspiration, inclusion. So many positive words, yeah. Not negative. And I'm a positive person. So divide is a negative word for me. And who would want that? We need to be building bridges together. And I saw that we could be that because people of all backgrounds were born in this hospital or died in this hospital. And people came here in its early days from all over St. Louis, because it was a very state-of-the-art hospital. And when they decided to move to West County, at first they were going to have a hospital here still. But then they decided, after I think Homer G. Phillips closed, that they weren't really the right person to be handling so many persons from the city. They didn't have the mechanisms for the Medicaid or Medicare, or whatever we had at that time. And they just stayed out in West County, and it became Charter Hospital, which was a company that just ran hospitals across the country. Then it became Regional Hospital, and then it became Connect Care. And all of those were struggling because they couldn't compete with Barnes Jewish Hospital or St. Louis U Hospital, who has everything, in one campus. So I think they made a good decision. The city had decided we aren't hospital operators. We need to move on. And I think they thought they might sell the building faster than they did, but it was hard to imagine a hospital, unless you have my imagination. It was hard to imagine this being what it turned out
today.
to be. And it's actually 500,000 square feet, which is half of the mall. But it's half of a mall, so it didn't seem that big to me. Because I'm used to malls that are 1 million square feet. So it didn't seem that big to me. And it still doesn't. But it is a good exercise platform. You can get your miles in.
And I joke with you when I do events about your size. Because you're small in stature, but you're huge when it comes to your leadership and what you do for a room. Where did that confidence come from? Because not only are you small in stature, but you got to walk into a room a lot of times full of men back in the day, and you had to captivate them. Where did that confidence come from?
It comes from a lot of different places, and it builds over time, because my first grade teacher, Mrs. Grace, who was a wonderful teacher, every Friday she would sharpen her red pencil that she used to grade our papers, and she would give it away. It was like a prize. She turned a negative into a positive, because you only got red marks on your paper if you had a mistake. And she didn't give it to the smartest or the most well-behaved or the best attendance. She gave it away to the child that made the most mistakes that week. And it was okay to make a mistake in the first grade. Now, you're only 6 years old, and we didn't know how to read in those days before we came to first grade. You learned all that. And she encouraged us. And you're 6 years old, you're raising your hand because you think you got it right. It's not a normal impulse to fake it. So that was one. And I still have I have my cigar box with many red pencils in it, because I made a lot of mistakes, and I learned that that's okay. You can make mistakes. My mother was my parents were both not college educated. My father learned his trade, which was electrician in the military. And my mother worked for Eleanor Roosevelt. She was her private traveling secretary. And she started with her in Albany, New York. My parents were from Albany, New York. And my mother worked when she was the governor's wife and the first lady. And my mother was an excellent typist and stenographer. So when Eleanor needed somebody to go with her to Washington, she picked my mother to go with her. And my mother went with Eleanor all over the country and saw all kinds of things that were wrong with the world. The children that were in asylums, people with mental health issues that we still have today. And when Franklin died, Eleanor gave this speech to the women that worked for her and said, go where you're going to live and fix one of the wrongs that we saw. And so I was always watching my mother do this social service work, and she started a school with 3 of her friends around Down syndrome, for children with Down syndrome. And we had kids dropped off on our door, like left overnight, like in a box on our door, because nobody wanted a child that couldn't be cured, if you will. And my mother had the power to change lives for families by bringing them into her school, not just my mom, but her friends. And all over the country, women were doing this. Mothers Against Drunk Driving, polio, all kinds of things. Women were that's where they started in the nonprofit world, coming up with ways that they could raise money to change the lives of their own children, and in turn change the lives of others. So I saw that. I was in that generation. And then I went to work. When I went to college, I had a great college education. One of my favorite professors was taught consumer marketing. And I realized I was a natural for this, because I have so many curiosities about why people buy what they buy. And I'm a real spender now, but then I didn't have the money to spend. I just looked. And each one of these things builds on your confidence. Oh, my mother also, one time I came home from school and I said, this kid just called me shrimp. And she says, you're not small, you're under tall. And so I always thought of myself as like a giraffe, like a baby giraffe, then a bigger giraffe. I love giraffes. And I think all you have to do is be able to see the big picture. Yeah. And if you can see the big picture, you can see your part in it. If you're always looking small, looking down instead of looking up. And I tell this to students on campus too, who are listening with their earbuds all the time and not really paying attention. Like right in front of you could be the idea of the century, but you're not looking for it anymore. And so I always had sort of a bigger mentality. The basketball coach next door taught me I could make these high baskets. So little things just build up. And when I went to work for the May department stores here in St. Louis, I had the greatest bosses you could ever imagine. It was a fantastic company. And they never treated me like I was a woman or lesser or small. They gave me work to do. And if I did it, I was rewarded for it. And I realized that I had picked the right business. Even though I had intended to go to law school, I was wanting to go to law school. I was working to pay for law school because I wanted to be a civil rights attorney. But I found my dream job in being able to be creative and be paid somebody else's money if you win or lose. But then the idea for Build-A-Bear came to me, and I had the 20-some years of experience or more at that point to know I could do it. I didn't just do things without having the experience to do them. I always wanted to know more about it before I ventured out to it. So I had enough knowledge that I could do that. If he can do it, I can do it.
But Build-A-Bear kind of was a wild jump, don't you think?
No, not really.
Here's what we're gonna let kids come in and build bears and stuff them, and everybody went, great idea.
No, everybody didn't say great idea. But it wasn't such a wild idea because really, if you think back, one of the things that I think we lose as we grow up is our kid think. When our parents tell us you can't do it. I don't know why you can't do it. Why can't we do it, Mommy? We just can't today. I don't have the time. We hear a lot of that. And I really think that we have to keep our kid think and imagine why we could do it or when we could do it. If we can't do it today, when could we do it? And so I always was thinking like a kid because I was over a lot of businesses, including Payless Kids and other businesses at the May Company that involved children's clothing, children's toys, children's everything. And I love that. I love that I could think like a kid in those kinds of roles. But as the higher up the ladder I went, the further away from my kid think I got. And when I came back home to start Build-A-Bear, I didn't know it was going to be Build-A-Bear, but I immersed myself with my friends' kids. I picked them up after school, and that's really where the idea came from. My next door neighbor, Katie and Jack, they were 10 and 7 at the time. I picked them up from school, and we went looking for Beanie Babies because they wanted them. And we went to a store that said they had them, but they didn't because the parents trolled the stores during the day and took the fun of discovery out of it. So Katie, in her inimitable, quiet way, she said, well, these are easy. We could make these. And the light bulb went off in my head in the middle of the toy store. We went home to the house. The kids went down to the basement to the craft room, and they started getting out the stuff to make it. And I was on Netscaping because it was late 96, early 97. And I was looking to see if there was a business I could buy that was making stuffed animals in America that I could reconfigure and reface it to the public. And Katie came upstairs. She said, what are you doing? And I told her, she said, well, I didn't mean that. I said, I know you didn't, but I think you're onto something. And kids were our first board of directors. I had 15 children that were on our board of directors before we had a board of directors because they were telling me what was right or what was wrong and what was good or what was bad, what else we should add. And they showed up for meetings. They were fantastic. Now, some people could have accused me of child labor, but it was just really wonderful. And I've always felt that. Why aren't there more customers on the boards of companies, to tell you what you need to hear about the business, insight, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And now we have social media. We put the bad out there because we can't get a hold of anybody to tell them the good, and so we just get mad about that and then we put it on social media. But really, all of that, in everybody's life, really, there are things that give you the confidence to go to the next level, or to also find out you may not want to do that, but you might want to do this. So it gives you choices. And I believe in that when I try to encourage children to get the highest education they can, because it provides you more inspiration and more choices in life. So you might not like what you set out to do, but now you like something else. And maybe you're an accountant and you don't want to be an accountant, but boy, having that numbers knowledge can help you do a whole lot of other things. And so I really feel like I would never saw myself as a small person. My mother wouldn't let me. My mother was also 4'10". She just always said, it's up to you. What do you want to do? You can do it. And I've had the good fortune to meet other people along the way, from famous people to not so famous people, that keep adding to that self-knowledge that I now have. They've inspired me, they've encouraged me. And in this neighborhood, there's a ton of them. They've been amazing to me.
That's cool. What's the next for you?
Oh, what's next for me? Well,
I mean,
this is a big
at some point
project.
you can actually retire and live on a beach somewhere and just kick up your feet.
No, I'm rewired, not retired.
Okay.
I have just put that ability to have ideas and to bring people together to make those ideas happen here in this format. But we're starting phase 2, and phase 2 is the rest of the hospital. It was the nursing school and the nursing gym, and so we're turning that into a totally different idea to support this project, but also support the greater neighborhood. So People's Health Clinic is expanding, and they're moving closer to us, and we're moving closer to them, technically. The only thing between us is an apartment building, and it's mostly a low-income apartment building. And we're going to put in more low-income apartments in our project, but I want to expand our reach, our membership, if you will. It's not really a member. Nobody has to buy a membership, but I want them to feel like members of this community into this building. So all of the activities that we do, they're going to know about. We're going to engage all of those apartment managers that are on Enright. All of them are low-income apartments, to bring their people to us and let us help them, and also let us engage them, because they're the people that you ask last about what do they think about this or that. And I want them to play a bigger role. I think that's really where our opportunity is not so much that they're undereducated or any of that. That's not necessarily so. Is that they see things we don't see because they're looking at it from a different level, and we need to see those things as well. So I'm really excited about that. We're going to add pickleball courts back here on the back. We're going to add, these are things neighbors told us they wanted. We're going to have chess tables in the back and outdoor movies at night, in the nights, in the good weather. We're going to have movie nights. We're going to have the gym. It's an the nursing school had a gym, and it was like an old high school gym. Like it had an auditorium stage on one end and basketball on the other. We're going to refurbish that totally, and we're going to have hopefully a local theater company is going to use it for the stage and the staging of events, and the schools can use it too. We're going to have after-school basketball. Mayor Griffith from Wellston is going to help us start local area basketball here as well after school, and we'll bring more young people here. And I think it's going to be a hopping place. It already is a hopping place.
Sounds like it.
We have a wonderful group of seniors here that we call it the Wisdom Cafe that come from pretty much close into this area, but not all. And we have lifelong learning that we do for them. We're going to expand that as well, because there's just so much more to learn. The longer you live, there's more things that you want to find out, and they have so many questions. We've done a great job on that. So we're going to do more. And there's not a day that we don't have from something somebody asks me to something somebody tells me, a new idea that we can build on to make this environment even more conducive to change for St. Louis. From people that live around here, but people that come here. This is change. It is no longer the divide. This building, before I would have even planned it, has become Divine. And people come from the south and the north. They feel safe here. We have plenty of parking. We have the deli, the pharmacy, the urgent care, the bank. We never had a bank in this neighborhood. They've given millions of dollars of loans, of car loans and home improvement loans and small business loans. The pharmacy, he's doing great, a young entrepreneur. I just am so admire what he's done. He found a urgent care. I couldn't convince anybody to open one. He did. Edward Jones is here helping people, working with the bank, because when they get enough money in your emergency fund, you can now put it into investments. And the deli has been very popular. So we're really excited about what we've been able to bring here. I wish we had more space that faced Delmar that we could put out to have more retail. But we're bringing density of population. We have students that live here, law students, medical students, seniors. Some already are low-income apartments. We're going to have low-income workforce housing added, 81 apartments. Teachers, sadly, are low-income. So we can house more teachers here. We can house that could engage with our community and help us be all that we're meant to be. And this was it is still a diverse community, diverse economically for sure, but it still is a diverse community. And I want the people that stayed here to stay, and I want to attract new people here as well.
You're on track.
Yeah, we are
definitely on track.
Until the tornado came, that slowed us down a little bit.
That threw us all for a loop that we weren't expecting. That's crazy. One of the things about this episode is that we learned quite a bit about you. One, you were a point guard. Yeah. Basketball is your first love. Who knew? Who knew? Two, Your mother worked for Eleanor Roosevelt. I can't believe I'm just now finding out about that.
Yeah. I'll show you a picture after.
That's amazing. How Build-A-Bear got started. I mean, you are just an amazing woman. And I don't know if you thought about that as a little girl, that one day I'm going to be all of this, or did it just naturally just come to you? Because, I get to meet a lot of people in St. Louis, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of heads of corporations, yet you may be the most powerful one I've met, and it's just because of the way you hold yourself and the way you hold yourself in this community.
Well, I actually grew up in a time when the world was changing rapidly. In the 50s and 60s, it was changing every day. A new invention was coming out, heart transplants and rocket ships to the moon. And what was there not to think about optimistically? And my family was very optimistic. My parents were, forward-thinking people. And I think that wore off on me, but I was always looking for that experience. And I think the other thing about Build-A-Bear that I was able to do is, my favorite thing in school was, I love school, but my favorite thing was field trips. And I didn't want to, we went to a bakery, or we went to a dairy, we went to a factory. I didn't want to be those things, but now I knew how they were doing it. I always wondered, how do they do that? I still wonder how they build underwater tunnels. How do they keep the water from getting in there? How do airplanes fly? I'm so curious about all that. My mother would say, just look it up in the World Book. And the World Book was my Google in those days. So I've never been afraid to ask a question from my first grade teacher, to raise my hand. Probably some people think, there she is again, a million questions, but tough. I'm going to still, if I have a question, I'm going to ask it. And I know sometimes I'm going to ask a question that other people have but are afraid to ask. And it might be controversial, it might not be. But I feel like that we all have the power to make the change that's necessary in this community, in this world, to help someone who can't help themselves. And when we use that power, we get more power. And people say thank you to this. I may have told this already, but when we moved into this building, the first week the apartments opened up, one of the residents, she was in a wheelchair, she came up to me, she said, "Are you Maxine Clark?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Can I hug you?" And this was right after COVID. I said, "Sure, you can hug me." And she said, "I just want you to know I'm never leaving." And I said, "Well, that's great. Why not?" And she said, "Well, I've never lived in a place where I had a washer dryer in my apartment, in the basement, let alone in my apartment. I've never had a microwave oven or a disposal. This is my dream home." And she said, "Can I show you my apartment?" And she took me over to her apartment, and it was a small studio apartment. And she had it decorated lovely, and she was so happy. And it makes you realize that you don't have to live in a big house in Ladue to have the dream come true. The dream come true can be something as simple as a studio apartment on Delmar in the city of St. Louis. And we just have to make them more available to people and make them as wonderful as we possibly can, because a lot of housing for people that is low priced is not high quality. This is high quality. Everybody has the same apartment here. And I mean, not the same size, but the same quality. Everything is the same. And they have big kitchens, they have big bathrooms, they have all these nice things. She told me this, she says, "Look at this, I can roll my wheelchair up to my bathroom sink. I've never been able to do that."
It's a big deal.
Yeah, and I thank God I don't have to do that, but now when I do, I will know how to do that. And so it's all learning, but it's also a village. It takes a village to raise a bear. It takes a village to raise a building, raise a building here. But this had so much character. It still does have the spirits of the people that worked here, died here, were born here, and some of them are famous St. Louisans. Andy Taylor was born here. Just so many good things happened here, and then some bad things, overcame this neighborhood, and the people disappeared. And it's funny, they went south, and they're very close by, but they put up gates so that and they put up those round balls that you couldn't cross through the streets. When I came to St. Louis, I thought, that is really weird. But we're trying to take out those things and make it so that people can ride their bikes.
More access.
And see and safely ride their bike on a smooth sidewalk. And some of that the city can't afford to do. We'll have to do it ourselves.
Fund it, yeah.
But if we can, why not? It's fun to kind of do that. And this neighborhood does get out and do that. They get out and they clean up the neighborhood. They put on events. We have a lot of fun here. And they've taken me in as a immigrant to this neighborhood.
Yeah. Well, I now know who can make the difference when all these changes need to be made. Maxine Clark, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
That was fun.